The human mind starts out with neither a bias towards the neurology or the biochemistry. The neurology is where all of the binary decisions are made. The biochemistry is where all of the analog decisions are made. If the brain was just one big neurology stuck into one big biochemical soup, well, not much would happen. But the brain is made up of a bunch of little tiny neural networks called ganglia. And each ganglion has maybe, 4,000 on up neurons in it, tightly packed with its own little microclimate zone of biochemicals. Now, in the 12th to 14th week of pregnancy, a developing fetus will either get a flush of testosterone or not during that time. If it does, then that testosterone has the well-known effect in the body to increase the amount of serotonin. Serotonin is a neurological exciter. And as a result of being an exciter, it sort of amplifies the effect of the neurology compared to the biochemistry. It makes it fire more easily, more often. So the neurology becomes much more active compared to the biochemistry. If there is no flush of testosterone, then it remains down and natural estrogen in the system produces dopamine, which is an inhibitor for the firing of the neurology. It doesn't add more dopamine. There's no flush of estrogen if there isn't a flush of testosterone. It's just there is no testosterone. So when the neurology is quieter, then the background biochemicals like shadows, when you turn a bright light off in front of your face, can come through, and they hold their own elegant information. That's analog information, where the emotions come from. Our time sense, our sense of the flow and ebb and patterns moving and undulating, anticipation, desires, that all comes from that biochemical side. Now, on the neurology side, we get our ones and our zeros. We get, yes, it's this, not that. We get networks. Here's what happens according to Dramatica theory. Dramatica theory is about the story mind, and it predicts that we need to know whether the story mind is male or female in order to be able to complete the structure of the story. What is a male mind? Well, in that 12th to 14th week of pregnancy, when there is the flush of testosterone and it creates the serotonin that excites the neurology, after the 12th to 14th week, it would just go away. Except for the fact that it's our belief that inside the ganglia, there are these little cells they know about called L cells and R cells. And it's our belief that the L cells or R cells, one of them, is a permanent creator of a baseline level of serotonin or other exciters within each ganglion, and that the other cell produces a certain level of dopamine. So it's our belief that during that 12th to 14th week, there's this steady wash of hormones. If it's there, then it will cause these L and R cells to lock in place with a certain ratio of which one's more active compared to the other. And at the level of the ganglia, that will be where it's determined if the neurology is more sensitive or if the biochemistry is more sensitive, which one has more sway. When you have the wash go away, it sets in place. And even though the overall biochemistry of the brain could be identical for men and women, at the level of each separate ganglion, there will be this built-in bias, like if you know electronics, it's a DC bias. It raises the whole level or lowers the whole level, so that it's going to emphasize the logistic reasonability or the logistic emotionability. So you're either going to be more towards the intuitive holistic or more towards the logistic. Now, there's another class that I teach on this mental sex area because it's a favorite area of mine. And in that class we talk about evolutionary-wise why it was not only necessary but it was unavoidable that two mental sexes, one favoring an appreciation of linearity in space and the other favoring an appreciation of holisticness in time, that these two should be created, each one seeing farther into one side than the other at the expense of looking in the other's direction. So one sees more into space at the expense of time, the other sees more into time at the expense of space. When they form a bonded pair and pair up, that's when they overlap and work together and can see farther between the two of them into space and time than any one organism could see by itself. Now, of course, that puts it in a position where at the beginning, when young children are born, young creatures are born, generally they are right in the middle pretty much with just a slight bias, that slight underlying bias to one side or the other. But at the same time that you reach puberty in humans and you get that hormone wash at puberty, then it adds to that bias, shoves you over to whichever side you're on one way or the other very strongly, And at that point moves you just as far as you can go without losing your overlap with the opposite sex, because you need that overlap for communication. And the other thing it does is that it makes sure that you have secondary sexual characteristics, so rather than going off on your own, you're drawn to the other side even though you can't communicate with them as fully.